Crystal chandeliers cast dancing shadows across the marble floors of Bellissimo, Phoenix's most exclusive restaurant where the elite dined, and million-dollar deals were sealed with handshakes. Evelyn Parker kept her head down as she navigated between tables, her simple black uniform a stark contrast to the designer gowns and Italian suits surrounding her on all sides. The hushed murmurs of conversation suddenly died, replaced by a heavy silence that made Evelyn's skin prickle with awareness. She turned to see the restaurant's owner rushing to greet a striking man in his late 20s, whose confident stride and cold eyes marked him as someone accustomed to power. Behind him walked an elegant older woman, her silver hair styled immaculately, fingers adorned with glittering diamonds that caught the light with every graceful movement of her hands. The signs were subtle, the slight tilt of her head as she watched lips, the attentive focus in her eyes, but Evelyn recognized them immediately. As the maitre d' guided them to the best table in the house, Evelyn noticed how other servers suddenly became occupied, none wanting to wait on the table everyone knew belonged to Nikolai Pavlov, the man who controlled half of Phoenix's underground empire. His reputation for ruthlessness preceded him everywhere he went, leaving a trail of whispered warnings in his wake. "Table 7 is yours," her manager hissed, shoving a menu into her hands before Evelyn could protest. "Don't mess this up. Mr. Pavlov tips generously when pleased and fires people when not." Evelyn approached the table with practiced composure, though her heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. She handed the leather-bound menus to Nikolai first, then to the older woman, who she now assumed was his mother. When the woman struggled to communicate her drink preference to her son, frustration flashed across her elegant features. Without thinking, Evelyn's hands moved fluidly in the air, signing, "Would you prefer the house specialty, a sparkling water, or perhaps a glass of Chardonnay?" The restaurant fell eerily silent as all eyes fixed on Evelyn's graceful movements, but she noticed only the older woman's face transforming with delight. Mrs. Pavlov's hands flew into motion, responding with enthusiasm, while Nikolai stared at Evelyn with an intensity that made her cheeks flush crimson. "Where did you learn to sign like that?" Nikolai asked, his voice surprisingly soft despite the hard edge in his eyes that suggested he revealed nothing without purpose. "Your technique is unusual." Evelyn swallowed hard, aware that every employee in the restaurant was watching this exchange, their faces a mixture of horror and fascination. "My younger brother was born deaf, sir," she answered truthfully, though the tightness in her throat betrayed there was more to the story. Mrs. Pavlov touched her son's arm, her fingers signing rapidly, as her eyes remained fixed on Evelyn, with something that looked dangerously like hope. Whatever she communicated made Nikolai's expression shift imperceptibly, the ice in his gaze thawing just enough to be noticed. "My mother would like you to be our personal server whenever we dine here," Nikolai translated, though Evelyn had understood perfectly. "She says your signing is the most beautiful she's seen outside our homeland." Evelyn nodded, suddenly aware that this simple act of communication had somehow altered the trajectory of her carefully constructed life. For 3 years, she had kept her head down, worked double shifts, and made herself forgettable, a shadow moving between tables with no past and no story. But as Mrs. Pavlov's hands moved in animated conversation, asking questions about Evelyn's family that she deflected with practiced ease, a single thought echoed through her mind. Her cover was slipping, and the safety she had built brick by lonely brick was about to crumble beneath the weight of unexpected connection. Evelyn's tiny apartment greeted her with familiar silence as she kicked off her shoes, exhausted after the double shift that had ended with serving the Pavlovs until closing time. The contrast between Bellissimo's opulence and her sparse living space was jarring. A single bed, second-hand furniture, and walls bare, except for a small collection of photographs hidden in her bedside drawer. 3 years ago, she had arrived in Phoenix with nothing but a backpack and the determination to disappear. The daughter of a small-town teacher had vanished, replaced by a woman who worked 16-hour days, spoke to no one about her past, and kept no social media presence that might leave digital breadcrumbs. Every morning, she woke before dawn to take online classes in criminal justice, saving every penny toward a degree that represented her silent promise to right the wrongs of her past. Her life had become a carefully constructed routine designed to attract no attention, until she had signed to the mother of Phoenix's most dangerous man. Across town, in a penthouse overlooking the glittering city, Nikolai Pavlov swirled aged whiskey in a crystal tumbler as his mother continued to sign enthusiastically about the waitress. Her excitement was rare enough that he found himself intrigued, despite his natural suspicion of strangers. The empire he had inherited at 25 had been built on his father's ruthless ambition, but Nikolai had transformed it, channeling illegal operations into legitimate businesses while maintaining the iron grip that kept rival families at bay. His reputation for calculated violence was carefully cultivated, a necessary evil in a world where weakness invited challenges. Yet beneath the armor of tailored suits and cold intimidation lived a man defined by one unwavering principle. Family came first, particularly his mother, whose deafness had shaped his childhood as he became her voice in a world that often overlooked those who communicated differently. Seeing his mother's immediate connection with the waitress had stirred something unexpected, a reluctant curiosity about the woman whose hands spoke so fluently. The following evening, as Evelyn served plates of handmade pasta to a couple celebrating their anniversary, the maitre d' appeared at her elbow, his expression tense. "Mr. Pavlov has just called. He's bringing his mother for dinner again tonight, and has specifically requested you as their server." Anxiety coiled in Evelyn's stomach as she nodded, aware that Nikolai's interest might extend beyond her signing abilities. Men in his position didn't become successful by accepting coincidences. They investigated anomalies until they uncovered truth or created destruction. The Pavlovs arrived precisely at 8, Mrs. Pavlov's face lighting up when she spotted Evelyn waiting at their regular table. Tonight the older woman wore an emerald necklace that matched her son's tie, her elegant hands already moving in greeting before they reached their seats. "My mother has been talking about you all day," Nikolai said, his observant eyes scanning Evelyn's face for reactions as he pulled out his mother's chair. "She rarely connects with people outside our circle." Evelyn smiled politely, careful to maintain the professional distance that had become her shield. "I'm honored she enjoyed our conversation, Mr. Pavlov. Would you like to hear tonight's specials, or would you prefer your usual selections?" Mrs. Pavlov tapped the table to get Evelyn's attention, then signed with elegant precision. "Please call me Irina. When you sign, I feel like I'm back in St. Petersburg before we moved to America when Nikolai was 12. Your technique has influences from Russian Sign Language. How is that possible?" The question hit dangerously close to secrets Evelyn couldn't afford to reveal. "My brother had a Russian teacher for several years," she answered, the practiced lie flowing smoothly as she added, "She incorporated elements into his education that I picked up as well." Nikolai's expression remained unreadable, but something in his eyes suggested he was cataloging every word, every micro-expression, building a profile of inconsistencies to explore later. "What a fortunate coincidence," he remarked, the slight emphasis on coincidence carrying a weight of skepticism. "Sometimes the world offers unexpected connections," Evelyn replied, desperately trying to steer the conversation back to safer territory. "Now, can I interest you in the black truffle risotto? The chef prepared it specially tonight." For the next 2 weeks, the Pavlovs became regular fixtures at Bellissimo, appearing 3 or 4 nights a week, and always requesting Evelyn as their server. Each visit extended their conversations, with Irina sharing stories of Russia, while Evelyn carefully constructed a fictional past that wouldn't raise suspicions. Though she maintained her professional demeanor, Evelyn found herself looking forward to these interactions, particularly the moments when Nikolai's carefully maintained facade would slip, revealing glimpses of the man beneath the reputation. His devotion to his mother was evident in every interaction, his hands sometimes joining their signed conversations with a fluidity that spoke of years of practice. One evening, as Evelyn cleared their dessert plates, Irina signed something to her son that made him frown slightly before his expression smoothed back into practiced neutrality. "My mother would like to invite you to join us for dinner tomorrow night, as our guest, not our server." The invitation sent warning signals flashing through Evelyn's mind, but refusal would draw more attention than acceptance. "That's very kind, but I couldn't possibly impose," she replied, her fingers unconsciously mirroring her words in sign, a habit formed during years of communicating with her brother. Irina's hands moved rapidly, her expression determined, as she argued her case directly to Evelyn. "Please, I have so few people to converse with in my language. One evening. Nikolai's driver will collect you at 7. My mother can be quite persistent," Nikolai added, his tone suggesting this was a significant understatement. "Consider it a business dinner if that makes it easier to accept. I own several restaurants and could use a consultant with your observant eye for service." The business pretext was clearly manufactured for her benefit, but Evelyn recognized the dangerous position she was in. Declining might suggest she had something to hide, while accepting meant venturing into Nikolai's territory where she would have no control. "Thank you for the invitation. I accept." As the Pavlovs left that evening, Nikolai handed her a business card with an address written on the back in elegant handwriting. My driver will arrive at 7, but should you change your mind, you can reach me at this number, he said, his fingers briefly brushing against hers in a contact that sent an unexpected current racing up her arm. That night, Evelyn couldn't sleep, her thoughts circling through potential scenarios and escape routes should the dinner prove to be a trap. She considered running, abandoning her apartment, and starting over in another city. But something beyond self-preservation kept her rooted in Phoenix. The truth she couldn't admit, even to herself, was that Nikolai Pavlov had begun to intrigue her. Beneath his calculated exterior lived a man of contradictions. A criminal who donated millions to deaf education programs. A ruthless businessman who treated service staff with unusual respect. A dangerous figure whose touch had left her skin tingling hours after that brief contact. At precisely 7 the following evening, a sleek black car pulled up outside her apartment building, the driver opening the door with a respectful nod. Evelyn had worn her only decent dress, a simple navy blue sheath that emphasized her slender frame, and carried a small purse containing the essentials for a quick escape if necessary. Instead of the expected restaurant, the car delivered her to a stunning Spanish colonial mansion, set behind imposing gates in Paradise Valley. As she was escorted through marble hallways adorned with museum-quality art, Evelyn's training kicked in, mentally mapping exits and cataloging potential weapons disguised as decorative objects. The dining room took her breath away, a soaring space with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking an illuminated garden where fountains danced against the backdrop of Camelback Mountain. Irina welcomed her with a warm embrace that momentarily stunned Evelyn, the genuine affection something she hadn't experienced in years. Nikolai stood by the window, the setting sun casting his sharp features in golden light as he turned to greet her. "Welcome to our home, Evelyn," he said, using her first name deliberately as he approached. "I hope the journey wasn't too intimidating." Evelyn felt strangely at ease as she settled into the oversized dining chair, watching Nikolai pour wine with practiced elegance. The mansion's grandeur faded into the background as Irina's animated signing captured her full attention, drawing her into stories of St. Petersburg's snow-covered streets. "My son tells me you're studying criminal justice online," Irina signed, her sharp eyes missing nothing as she observed Evelyn's momentary hesitation. "An unusual choice for someone in your position." Evelyn's fingers moved carefully, constructing a response that revealed enough truth to be convincing without exposing her real motivations. "I believe in justice, especially for those who can't speak for themselves, like my brother often couldn't." Nikolai translated nothing, his gaze fixed on Evelyn's hands as they formed each sign with practiced precision. "Your brother, you speak of him in past tense," he observed quietly, serving her a portion of beef Wellington prepared by his private chef. Heat rushed to Evelyn's cheeks as she realized her mistake, the carefully constructed facade threatening to crack under Nikolai's perceptive gaze. "He lives with my parents in Minnesota now," she lied smoothly, the fabrication sliding from her lips with practiced ease. Irina intervened, her hands moving to change the subject as she sensed Evelyn's discomfort. "Tell me about your favorite book. I find reading preferences reveal more than any direct question ever could." The conversation flowed more naturally after that, weaving between literature, art, and Phoenix's changing landscape, with Evelyn carefully navigating away from personal revelations, while Nikolai watched her with calculating interest. His intensity should have frightened her, yet instead it awakened something dormant inside her, a dangerous curiosity. When dinner concluded, Irina insisted on showing Evelyn her prized garden, leaving the two younger people alone for the first time. The silence stretched between them, filled with unasked questions and undeniable tension. "You're hiding something," Nikolai finally stated, not an accusation but a simple observation as he swirled amber liquid in his crystal glass. "Everyone has secrets, but yours seem to haunt you." Evelyn met his gaze steadily, years of training preventing her from flinching under his scrutiny. "We all have pasts we'd rather leave behind, Mr. Pavlov. Even you, I imagine." A ghost of a smile touched his lips as he leaned forward slightly, the movement bringing his cologne, sandalwood and something uniquely his, to her senses. "Call me Nikolai, please. And yes, though in my world, the past has an unfortunate habit of resurfacing at the least convenient moments." The warning in his words was subtle, but unmistakable, and Evelyn's pulse quickened in response. "Is that a threat, or simply an observation?" she asked, surprising herself with her boldness. Nikolai's laugh was unexpected, a rich, genuine sound that transformed his severe features into something dangerously appealing. Neither. Perhaps it's advice from someone who recognizes a kindred spirit trying to outrun something significant. Before she could respond, the door opened and Irina returned, her face glowing with enthusiasm as she signed rapidly about orchids and night-blooming jasmine. The moment between Evelyn and Nikolai dissolved, yet something had fundamentally shifted in their dynamic. As his driver returned her to her apartment later that evening, Evelyn found a small envelope on the car seat beside her. Inside was an exquisite silver bracelet with a single charm, hands forming the sign for friend, and a handwritten note from Irina thanking her for the evening. The following Tuesday evening at Bellissimo, Evelyn sensed something was wrong the moment 3 men in expensive suits requested a table with a clear view of the Pavlovs' regular spot. Their calculated casualness raised red flags honed from years of training she couldn't acknowledge. Nikolai and Irina arrived precisely at 8, but tonight, Nikolai's usual controlled demeanor seemed heightened, his eyes constantly scanning the room as his hand occasionally drifted toward his tailored jacket. Something had him on edge, and Evelyn's instincts screamed danger. As she served their appetizers, Evelyn leaned slightly closer than necessary, her voice barely audible as she murmured, 3 men at table 12 have been watching the entrance for the past hour. They ordered expensive wine, but haven't touched it. Nikolai's eyes flickered briefly toward the men before returning to Evelyn, surprise and something like respect flashing across his features. Quite observant for a waitress, he replied softly, his hand brushing against hers as he reached for his water glass. The contact sent electricity racing up her arm, but Evelyn maintained her professional composure as she moved between tables, keenly aware of the tension building in the restaurant's rarefied air. The men at table 12 were growing impatient, their whispered conversations becoming more animated with each passing minute. When Evelyn returned to the Pavlovs with their main course, Nikolai signed something to his mother that made her nod gravely before gathering her purse. "We'll be leaving after this course," he informed Evelyn, his voice casual, though his eyes conveyed urgency. The men at table 12 chose that moment to stand, one reaching beneath his jacket in a movement Evelyn recognized all too well. Without hesitation, she stumbled dramatically, sending a tray of water glasses crashing to the floor directly in their path. Cold water soaked their expensive shoes as Evelyn apologized profusely, creating enough commotion that Nikolai was able to escort his mother toward the kitchen's rear exit. The carefully orchestrated accident bought them precious seconds that likely saved their lives, as Evelyn later discovered. Later that night, as Evelyn walked to her car after her shift ended, a familiar black sedan pulled alongside her, the window lowered to reveal Nikolai's stern face, his usual composed expression replaced with something darker and more dangerous. "Get in," he commanded, his tone leaving no room for refusal as his eyes scanned the darkened parking lot. "Those men haven't left the area, and you've made yourself a target by interfering." Fear and exhilaration battled in Evelyn's chest as she slid into the vehicle's leather interior, immediately noting the bulge of a shoulder holster beneath Nikolai's jacket. "I didn't interfere. I simply had an unfortunate accident with the water glasses." Nikolai's eyes met hers in the dim light, his gaze penetrating as though trying to solve the puzzle she presented. An accident that happened at precisely the right moment, executed by a woman who noticed armed men before my own security detail identified them. The car moved smoothly through Phoenix's nighttime streets, taking an elaborate route of random turns designed to identify any potential tails. "Who exactly are you? Evelyn Parker?" Nikolai finally asked, her name sounding like a challenge on his lips. "Just a waitress who pays attention to her surroundings," she replied, the lie tasting bitter as it crossed her tongue. In restaurants like Bellissimo, recognizing trouble before it starts is an essential job skill. Nikolai's laugh held no humor, as the car turned into a private underground garage beneath a luxury high-rise. "We both know that's not the whole truth, but for tonight, I'm more concerned with keeping you alive than unraveling your mysteries." The penthouse suite occupied the entire top floor of the building, its panoramic views of Phoenix's glittering skyline momentarily distracting Evelyn from the gravity of her situation. She had stepped directly into Nikolai's world, a place she had spent 3 years carefully avoiding. "You'll stay here tonight," Nikolai stated rather than asked, removing his jacket to reveal the expected shoulder holster and the gleaming pistol it contained. "My security team is checking your apartment to ensure it hasn't been compromised." Anger flashed through Evelyn despite her precarious position. "You have no right to invade my privacy or dictate my movements," she said, standing her ground even as Nikolai's expression darkened dangerously. The tension between them crackled like electricity before he finally responded. "The Bellini family doesn't leave witnesses, Evelyn. Those men saw you help us escape. That makes you a loose end they'll want to eliminate." His words sent ice through her veins, the name Bellini triggering memories she had buried deep beneath her carefully constructed new identity. "How do you know it was the Bellinis?" she asked, struggling to keep her voice steady. Nikolai's eyes narrowed at her reaction, cataloging every micro-expression that crossed her face. "We've been at odds since they tried to move into Phoenix territory last year. Tonight was their third assassination attempt, though the first time they've targeted my mother as well." The information should have sent Evelyn running, yet instead she found herself stepping closer to Nikolai, close enough to catch the faint scent of his cologne mingling with gunpowder. "Let me go home. I can take care of myself. I have for years." His laugh was humorless as he poured 2 glasses of bourbon, handing one to her without asking if she wanted it. "The woman who spilled water on armed men doesn't strike me as someone who runs from danger, which makes me even more curious about who you really are." Evelyn accepted the drink, using the burning liquid to fortify herself against Nikolai's penetrating gaze. "My past is irrelevant to your current situation. Tomorrow I'll return to my apartment and we can pretend tonight never happened." "Your past becomes extremely relevant when it intersects with my present," Nikolai countered, moving to the floor-to-ceiling windows where the city lights created a halo effect around his imposing silhouette. "Especially when that intersection saved my mother's life." A phone call interrupted their standoff, Nikolai's expression hardening as he listened to the caller before responding in rapid Russian that Evelyn understood perfectly, despite her efforts to appear ignorant. They had found something at her apartment, something that threatened everything she had built. When he ended the call, his eyes held new knowledge that made Evelyn's heart race with fight-or-flight adrenaline. "It seems we have more to discuss than I initially thought," he said, his voice deceptively soft as he set his phone on the marble counter. Evelyn calculated her options, eyes darting toward the elevator before Nikolai's voice cut through her thoughts. "Running won't help you now. Not when the Bellinis have your address and the FBI has apparently been watching your apartment for weeks." Her carefully constructed world crumbled around her as Nikolai continued. "So tell me, who is Agent Evelyn Reynolds? And why has one of the Bureau's most promising undercover operatives been pretending to be a waitress in my favorite restaurant?" The silence stretched between them, heavy with accusations and betrayal, before Evelyn finally spoke the truth for the first time in 3 years. "I was Agent Reynolds, past tense. I've been officially dead since the Bellini massacre in Chicago left me with a bullet in my shoulder and my entire team murdered." Understanding dawned in Nikolai's eyes, followed by something unexpected, respect tinged with empathy. "You're the agent who infiltrated their organization and nearly brought down Giuseppe Bellini before the operation was compromised." Evelyn nodded, relief and terror mingling as her true identity hung in the open between them. "The Bureau thought I died in that warehouse. I let them believe it when I realized the Bellinis had informants within the FBI itself." 3 weeks later, Evelyn stood beside Nikolai in his home office, studying blueprints of an abandoned warehouse by the Phoenix harbor where Giuseppe Bellini was supposedly holding a shipment of illegal weapons. The intelligence had come from one of Nikolai's sources within the Bellini organization, a man who had grown increasingly uncomfortable with Giuseppe's expanding drug operations. Irina entered the room silently, her hands moving in rapid signs as she expressed concern about the danger of the operation. Since learning Evelyn's true identity, Irina had become even more protective, treating her with the affection usually reserved for family. "We'll be careful," Evelyn signed back, the silver bracelet Irina had given her catching the light as her hands moved through the air. "Your son has assembled an excellent team, and I've done this before." Nikolai's transformation over the past weeks had surprised Evelyn, the ruthless crime boss working alongside her to build a case against the Bellinis that could be handed to trustworthy FBI contacts without exposing her survival. Their shared goal had created an unexpected partnership built on growing trust and reluctant admiration. "You should stay here," Nikolai told Evelyn, as his security team loaded weapons into unmarked SUVs in the underground garage. "The Bellinis believe you're dead. That advantage disappears the moment Giuseppe sees your face." Evelyn checked her borrowed firearm with practiced efficiency, the familiar weight of the weapon in her hands awakening muscle memory from her FBI days. "If I stay behind, you lose the only person who can positively identify Giuseppe among his bodyguards." The drive to the harbor passed in tense silence, Nikolai's men communicating through encrypted channels as they positioned themselves around the warehouse's perimeter. Evelyn felt strangely calm as she slipped a Kevlar vest over her black tactical clothing, her training resurfacing like a second language long unused, but never forgotten. "Stay behind me," Nikolai instructed, as they approached the warehouse's side entrance, his usual commanding tone softened by genuine concern. "These men won't hesitate to kill you, especially if they recognize you." The warehouse air hung heavy with the scent of fish and salt water, shadows stretching across concrete floors as Nikolai's team moved silently through the maze of shipping containers. Evelyn's heartbeat steadied with each step, her senses heightened as she scanned for movement among the towering metal boxes. The ambush came without warning, gunfire erupting from multiple directions as Bellini's men emerged from hidden positions behind crates and containers. Nikolai pushed Evelyn behind a steel column, just as bullets ricocheted off the concrete where she had been standing seconds before. "It's a trap," she hissed, recognizing the precision of the attack as Nikolai's men returned fire, the warehouse echoing with deafening gunshots and shouted commands. Someone betrayed us. They were waiting for us. Through the chaos, Evelyn spotted a familiar figure moving toward a rear exit, Giuseppe Bellini himself, flanked by 2 bodyguards as he attempted to escape the firefight. Without hesitation, she signaled to Nikolai before slipping away, using the shipping containers as cover as she pursued the man responsible for murdering her FBI team. The salt-laden air hit her face as she emerged onto the loading dock, catching sight of Bellini entering a black sedan parked 50 yards away. Drawing her weapon, Evelyn took careful aim at the vehicle's tires, firing twice with precision that sent the car swerving into a stack of empty pallets. Giuseppe emerged from the damaged vehicle, his infamous temper evident as he shouted orders at his disoriented bodyguards. When he turned and saw Evelyn approaching with her weapon raised, his face transformed with shock and rage, recognition dawning as he stared at the ghost of the agent he believed he'd killed 3 years ago. "Impossible," he spat, reaching for his own weapon as his bodyguards formed a protective barrier. "I watched you bleed out on that warehouse floor in Chicago." Evelyn's voice remained steady as she replied, "You should have checked more thoroughly," her finger tensing on the trigger as Giuseppe raised his gun toward her. The shot that rang out came not from either of their weapons, but from behind her where Nikolai had emerged silently. Giuseppe collapsed with a precision shot to his shoulder, his weapon clattering across the concrete as Nikolai's men swarmed the scene, subduing the bodyguards with efficient, practiced movements. The man who had haunted Evelyn's nightmares for 3 years lay groaning at her feet, no longer the terrifying specter, but simply a bleeding criminal awaiting justice. The following evening found Evelyn sitting in Nikolai's study, watching as he poured 2 glasses of his finest vodka to celebrate Giuseppe Bellini's arrest and the dismantling of his Phoenix operation. The FBI had taken custody of Bellini without learning of Evelyn's involvement, thanks to Nikolai's careful orchestration and connections within the bureau. "To justice, served in unorthodox ways," Nikolai toasted, his eyes reflecting the firelight as he studied Evelyn across the rim of his glass, "and to partnerships formed in unlikely circumstances." Evelyn's laugh held genuine warmth as she raised her glass in response, the tension of the past months finally easing from her shoulders. "I never imagined I'd find allies in the very world I once investigated, yet here we are." The door opened to admit Irina, who immediately began signing with excitement about the news reports covering Bellini's arrest. Her hand slowed as she noticed the intimate atmosphere between her son and the former agent, a knowing smile touching her lips as she signed something that made Nikolai's expression soften unexpectedly. "My mother says you've brought honor back to our family by helping us eliminate Bellini through legal channels rather than violence," Nikolai translated, though Evelyn had understood perfectly. "She believes this marks a turning point for our organization." Irina's hands continued moving, her expression growing more serious as she conveyed thoughts clearly meant for Evelyn alone. "She also says that lost daughters sometimes find new families in unexpected places, and that her heart has room for one more child, should you wish to stay." Emotion tightened Evelyn's throat as she realized how deeply she had come to care for this woman who had welcomed her without judgment. "Please tell her that I'm honored by her words," she replied, her own hands forming the signs alongside her spoken response. "I don't need to translate for you anymore, do I?" Nikolai asked, setting his glass down as he moved to sit beside Evelyn on the leather sofa. "You've understood Russian sign language from the beginning, long before you met us." Evelyn nodded, deciding that truth was the only path forward now that her official identity had been laid to rest, along with Giuseppe Bellini's freedom. "My cover within the Bellini organization was as an interpreter for their deaf Russian business associates. I spent a year learning both the language and its signed counterpart before going undercover." Irina clasped her hands together in delight at this revelation, immediately launching into rapid signs that revealed how she had suspected all along, but had chosen to respect Evelyn's secrets. The genuine acceptance in her eyes broke something within Evelyn, the final wall she had maintained between herself and this unlikely family. "I've been running for so long that I've forgotten what it feels like to belong somewhere," Evelyn admitted, her voice barely above a whisper as Nikolai's hand found hers, his touch no longer hesitant, but sure and comforting. "Then stop running," he suggested, his usual commanding tone replaced by something gentler, yet no less powerful. "The Bellini threat has been neutralized, and your former agency believes you died a hero's death years ago. Perhaps it's time to build something new from the ashes of who you once were." Irina excused herself with a knowing smile, leaving Evelyn and Nikolai alone in the warmth of the study where the boundaries between them had slowly dissolved over weeks of shared purpose and growing attraction. The silence between them held possibility rather than danger now, a shift that both recognized but neither had yet acknowledged directly. "Your organization still operates outside the law," Evelyn finally said, naming the elephant in the room as she had been trained to do, confronting difficult truths head-on rather than avoiding them. "I spent my career fighting against exactly the kind of empire you've built." The weight of her past pressed against her present, as memories of fallen colleagues flashed through her mind. Good agents who had died believing in the clear division between right and wrong. Yet her time with Nikolai had revealed the complex humanity behind decisions made in a world of limited choices and generational obligations. "My father died believing strength came only through fear," Nikolai confessed, his voice dropping to a register she'd never heard before. "It was my mother who showed me that true power lies in transformation, in having the courage to envision something better than what you inherited." Outside the study windows, Phoenix's lights glimmered like earthbound stars, a city unaware of the pivotal conversation happening within these walls. Evelyn thought of her brother, whose deafness had taught her that communication transcended conventional boundaries, much like the unconventional alliance she'd formed with the Pavlovs. Irina had once signed to her during a quiet moment in the garden that some people were bridges between worlds, rare individuals who could translate not just languages, but perspectives. "Perhaps that's what we both are," Evelyn mused aloud. "Bridges between what was and what could be." Nikolai's thumb traced circles on her palm, the simple touch sending warmth cascading through her body as he considered her words. "My father built an empire on violence and fear. I've spent 5 years transforming it into something different, something legitimate. Giuseppe Bellini was the last significant obstacle in that transformation." For the first time, Evelyn allowed herself to see the full picture of what Nikolai had been doing, the strategic acquisitions of legitimate businesses, the charitable foundations for deaf education, the gradual distancing from traditional criminal enterprises. "You've been cleaning house," she realized, pieces falling into place as she looked at him with new understanding. Nikolai nodded, his expression more open than she had ever seen it, as he revealed the truth he had shared with no one else. "By next year, the Pavlov organization will exist only on paper, a holding company for restaurants, real estate, and technology investments. No guns, no drugs, no protection rackets, just business, conducted in the light rather than the shadows." His revelation changed everything, transforming the choice before Evelyn from a moral compromise to a partnership in redemption. "And what role do you see for a dead FBI agent in this new legitimate empire?" she asked, her heart racing as Nikolai's hand moved to cup her cheek. "Whatever role she wants," he answered simply, his eyes holding hers with an intensity that took her breath away. "Partner, advisor, friend, or perhaps something more, if she's willing to take that risk." 6 months later, Evelyn stood behind the hostess podium at Nuovo Inizio, New Beginning in Italian, the restaurant she and Nikolai had opened together in downtown Phoenix. The elegant space combined the luxury of Bellissimo with warmth and accessibility, creating an atmosphere where business executives and working families could enjoy exceptional cuisine side by side. The restaurant represented more than a business venture. It was the public face of Nikolai's transformed organization and a symbol of Evelyn's new identity as Catherine Bennett, restaurant owner and fiancée to one of Phoenix's most respected businessmen. The transition had been surprisingly easy, her natural aptitude for hospitality complementing Nikolai's business acumen in ways neither had anticipated. Irina entered through the main doors, accompanied by her deaf friends from the community center, where she now taught Russian literature classes using sign language. The silver-haired woman beamed with pride as she surveyed the bustling restaurant, her hands signing enthusiastic greetings to Evelyn across the crowded space. "Your future mother-in-law has brought reinforcements," joked Paul, the head chef Nikolai had recruited from a Michelin-starred restaurant in San Francisco. "Shall I prepare the special tasting menu she pretends not to expect every Wednesday?" Evelyn laughed, the sound coming easily now that she no longer lived in constant fear of discovery or reprisal. "Absolutely. And add that blackberry sorbet she pretended not to love last week but actually had 3 servings of." As Paul returned to the kitchen, Evelyn felt strong arms encircle her waist from behind, Nikolai's familiar cologne enveloping her senses as he placed a gentle kiss at the nape of her neck. Despite his continued transformation into a legitimate businessman, he maintained the commanding presence that had first drawn her attention that fateful night at Bellissimo. "The meeting with the investors went well," he murmured, his breath warm against her ear as they watched Irina settle her friends at their regular table by the windows. "They've approved funding for the culinary school. Deaf students will receive full scholarships starting next fall." Pride swelled in Evelyn's chest at this latest achievement in their shared mission to create opportunities for the deaf community. Irina will be thrilled. She's already planning to teach a course on food culture and its relationship to Russian literature. The restaurant had become more than a business. It was a community hub, where weekly sign language classes brought together people from all walks of life, breaking down barriers of communication in ways that transformed Phoenix's social landscape. Local media had featured their innovative approach, bringing attention to deaf culture and accessibility issues that had long been overlooked. "Have you told her about the house yet?" Nikolai asked, referring to the wedding present he had secretly purchased, a spacious home with a separate guest cottage where Irina could maintain her independence while remaining close to family. "Or should we wait until after the engagement party this weekend?" Before Evelyn could respond, the restaurant's front door opened to admit an unexpected visitor, Director Carson of the FBI's Phoenix field office, the man who had led the investigation into the Bellini organization, and, unknowingly, received crucial intelligence from Nikolai's sources channeled through trustworthy agents. Nikolai's body tensed momentarily before relaxing. Their careful vetting had confirmed that Carson had never been compromised by the Bellinis, and had no knowledge of Agent Reynolds' true fate. Still, having the FBI director dining in their restaurant created an irony not lost on either of them. "Mr. Pavlov," Carson greeted with professional courtesy as he approached. "I hope you don't mind my dropping by unannounced. I've heard remarkable things about your new establishment." Evelyn stepped forward, extending her hand with practiced ease that betrayed none of her internal tension. "Catherine Bennett, Mr. Pavlov's partner and co-owner. We'd be delighted to offer you our chef's tasting menu this evening. On the house, of course." Carson studied her face with the intensity common to law enforcement professionals, but his eyes showed no recognition, only appreciation for the gracious welcome. "Very kind of you, Ms. Bennett. I've been meaning to visit since reading about your sign language initiatives in the Tribune last month." The familiar cadence of Carson's voice transported Evelyn momentarily back to bureau briefing rooms, where she had stood presenting evidence against the very type of organization she now helped transform. The irony wasn't lost on her as she recommended the truffle risotto, a dish she had first tasted during an undercover operation targeting Italian money launderers. Across the restaurant, she noticed Irina teaching one of her friends a special sign, the private symbol the Pavlov family now used to represent their unique bond forged through adversity and redemption. The older woman's graceful hands moved with purpose, each gesture carrying meaning beyond what casual observers could comprehend. "Your sign language program has become quite the talking point in Phoenix," Carson commented, unaware that the woman before him had once been his most promising agent. "My niece is taking your Tuesday night beginners class, says it's changed how she perceives communication entirely." The restaurant hummed with conversation and life, a testament to what could be built from the ashes of the past, when courage overcame fear. At a nearby table, a young deaf couple celebrated their anniversary, their animated signing a beautiful dance of expression that drew appreciative glances rather than uncomfortable stares, exactly as Evelyn and Nikolai had envisioned when creating this space. As Evelyn guided him to a prime table near the center of the restaurant, she caught Nikolai's eye across the room, sharing a moment of private amusement at the situation's absurdity. 3 years ago, she had been hunting criminals like Nikolai. Now she was seating her former boss for dinner in the restaurant they owned together. Later that night, after the last guests had departed and staff had completed closing procedures, Evelyn and Nikolai stood on the restaurant's rooftop garden under a canopy of desert stars. The Phoenix skyline sparkled around them, a city transformed in her eyes from a hiding place to a home. "Any regrets?" Nikolai asked softly, his fingers intertwining with hers as they gazed across the urban landscape, where their separate worlds had collided and merged into something neither could have imagined. About leaving your old life behind? Evelyn considered the question seriously, as she did all things, her analytical mind weighing the paths not taken against the unexpected journey that had led her here. I joined the FBI to bring justice and make a difference. Somehow, in the most unexpected way, I'm still doing exactly that, just from a different angle. Nikolai's smile held understanding as he drew her closer, the diamond ring on her left hand catching starlight as she rested her palm against his chest. From hunting monsters to rehabilitating them. Quite a career change, Agent Reynolds. Former agent, she corrected with a teasing smile, rising on tiptoes to brush her lips against his. And you were never the monster in this story. Just a man doing what he thought necessary to protect his family until a better way presented itself. Their kiss deepened under the desert sky. Two people who had found redemption and purpose in each other's arms, despite the odds stacked against them. The restaurant below represented their shared vision, a place where barriers fell away, where communication transcended traditional boundaries, and where new beginnings were always possible. As Phoenix's lights twinkled around them, Evelyn knew with absolute certainty that her greatest undercover role had led to her truest self, not as an agent or a waitress, or even as Catherine Bennett, but simply as a woman who had found her place in a world where sign language had built a bridge between hearts when words alone could not. Thank you all for following this story. If you enjoyed it, please write in the comments where you're watching from, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video, as your support is essential for me to continue creating content like this.